Hey, this is Nick from JangaFX, and I'm here to teach you IlluGen. I wonder if the audio is still desynced like it was yesterday. If it is, let me know in the chat. Nothing I can do about it right this second, but I'm going to turn my camera off for the majority of the stream anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Um, but what we're going to do is we're going to show off IlluGen, and let me go ahead and hop on into the presentation here. So what we're going to do is we are going to show you the basics of IlluGen. Hopefully by the time you are done watching this live training, you will be pretty proficient in IlluGen. There's a lot of things. There's no possible way that I can actually show you every single thing inside of the software. But one of the cool things is we're going to go over a number of different types of assets that you can create today. Then I hope from there you can kind of take that knowledge and apply it to other things that you want to create. Of course, we have a very active Discord channel for IlluGen right this second, and we have quite a lot of people posting stuff, asking how to do things, and we've been helping people there. So if you have any questions, if you need help on a project, just log into your Discord and come talk to us, and we are happy to help. And if we don't have a feature that you really need, let us know, and we will try to add it to the software. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Actually, let me slurp some water, and then we'll get started. Okay, so basically the first thing I want to talk about, and let me make sure I bring up my notes, because I have a lot of notes here that I want to make sure I go through properly. So the first thing is kind of, what is IlluGen? And we've talked about this numerous times, but IlluGen is a real-time visual effects asset generator. So that's going to be things like noises, flow maps, meshes, custom UV channels, custom like UV baking, vertex colors, pivot painting, or rather pivot point exporting, vertex animated textures when we get that feature in, mesh flipbooks, packing flipbooks, unpacking flipbooks, all kinds of stuff, right? So it's a generalized tool for visual effects, and it helps you do a lot of the cool asset-oriented things you would need. And so it's not a system, say like Popcorn Effects or Niagara or Cascade. It's not like that. It is a thing that creates assets that you would use in those particle editors. And so that's kind of the core gist of what this is. And it's kind of a mix of, say something like Substance Designer, a little bit of Blender, a little bit of Houdini, a little bit of Photoshop, a little bit of After Effects. And so we kind of take, all of the cool little things that you do and all of those other tools, for the visual effects or tech art realm, and we've put that into one tool, and we're going to continue expanding on our feature set. So that's kind of the gist of what it is. All right. And so the first thing I want to show is like, how do you actually find a preset? Because a lot of people tend to miss it. So if you go over here to the home screen, when you launch the software, you should be able to see something like this. So these are our tutorials. We've got my recent projects I've worked on. And over here on the left, you can see a presets button. You click that, and then these are a bunch of presets that you can actually come in and open. So for instance, if I opened, let's say this droplets here, you can see that nothing is actually showing. That's because you have to click the output. And if you press spacebar, that's going to play your timeline, and then R resets your timeline. It's just like Embergen or LiquiGen. So you should feel right at home with the UI there. You'll notice that I have two different viewports. One over here on the left is a 2D viewport, and on the right it is a 3D viewport. And you can see that right now I have 2D plus 3D selected, and we have a number of different viewport configuration options. So for instance, if you want to swap them to be up and down, you can do that. Or if you want to swap them left to right, or vice versa, you can do that with these two different buttons to kind of swap it around to make it more of yours of what you want. You can also go around and drag node tabs and things like that to rearrange things more if you want to. I'm not going to do that because I like my particular setup that I have here. The next part is so let me go to my live training preset that I made here, because it's going to have a bunch of different stuff that I'm going to show off. So let me just find my primary thing. So here you can see that I'm previewing an output, and I can view my 2D viewport here by itself. And so typically if I'm working in 2D, I'm usually only looking at the 2D viewport. I don't have the 3D viewport open personally. And so we have a couple of buttons that I want to kind of run through real quick. This first button basically shows the tiling of the texture. So most textures inside of IlluGen tile by default. And then if you want to see where the original texture is, you can kind of come here and look at this. And so this right here is going to show you that outline for you and kind of gray out everything else. And so that you can kind of work, you know that it's tiling properly, but you can see where your original texture is. And this last one is kind of like striped lines. And so if I have let's see if I can actually make it happen, potentially, or maybe not. Might need to do like a levels or something. But basically what it is if you have a value that is absolute black, it will show it as a striped line is kind of the idea, right? And so if you want to kind of see, where those absolute values are, and it may even do it in the opposite. Yeah, it does. So if you want to see where your absolute white is, your absolute black is, you can use the striped line view to kind of show you where the range of your values are is kind of what that's for. So that's what those buttons do. And then this last one is bilinear filtering. And so this is very useful to kind of smooth out your textures and stuff. And this is typically probably what your game engine is going to be doing, to show you your textures inside your game. But if you don't want to see that, say if you want to do something like point filtering, and that's, if we came in here and did like a 32 by 32 texture, you can see that right now we're doing point filtering over here in the graph, but if I have bilinear filtering on, it's going to filter out this texture. But then if I uncheck this, you can actually see that I can see all the individual pixels. And so if you want to do things like pixel art or whatever, you're probably going to want to uncheck this filter and then set your filtering up here to point. Now, usually I just stay in linear and then keep bilinear filtering on whenever I'm working. The next thing is, like I've mentioned, if you want to, let me set this back to 1024 real quick. So you can see that you can also do non-square textures. So if you don't want a square texture, you can come in and author non-square textures if you need custom stuff like a beam or a laser or something like that. That's how you're going to be able to do that kind of thing without using a whole bunch of texture space. So moving forward, the next thing is, like I mentioned, you click your outputs to kind of preview different things. You can also double click a node and that's going to do the same thing. If you want to preview geometry, you also click the same outputs. You'll notice it right now. I've clicked it and now my viewport is blank. That's because I'm still in the 2D tab. You can click, say, auto, and then if I go over here and click these different things, it's going to automatically swap tabs for me. I tend to not want to do that because I want to control when things happen in the viewport, just in case I misclick something. I don't want things to change automatically and me be kind of confused. And so I would just probably come in here and manually choose this. Now, if you want to navigate in your 3D viewport, you press Alt and left mouse button. That's going to allow you to rotate around things. You kind of come in, zoom in, you can pan, things like that. And all of the controls are down here at the bottom of the screen whenever you hover over. It'll tell you all the different keybinds and stuff that we have. Now, of course, we do have interesting things like you can toggle the grid, you can do shadows, you can show all the individual vertices, you can show, I believe these are the normals. You can show, what is this one? This was point orientation. So if these were acting like particles, it'll show you the various points. You can see the indice numbers. So if you're trying to do some kind of operation, on a mesh, you're like, man, like why is this doing it in this particular order? Maybe seeing the indices and the various numbers can help you. And so if I untoggle all these, if you click this button right here, it's going to show you your UVs. And if you come in and pack, say, different UV channels, which you can by doing, say, like a geometry promote, I believe it's called. And so if we come over here and we type, say, promote attribute, you could come in here and say what you want to do for different channels, and it would export that particular item for you once you export the mesh. So that's what these different channels are, and that's pretty cool. And then, of course, if you want to kind of come through and see, say different vertex colors, that's what this would be if this actually had vertex colors in it. And so, of course, inside of IlluGen, you can assign various vertex colors to a specific piece of geometry, which I think is pretty cool. And so that's really interesting if you want to do, say like the 3D flower that we did, and you want the petals to be a different colors from the stem and so on. And if you wanted to be more stylized or something in your game and color it through vertex colors, you can do all kinds of cool geometry manipulation like that, which I think is interesting. Um, and so let's see, the next thing is, so I showed preview tiling and previewing. So I think the next part is showing how you actually go through and reroute a node. So this right here is just more general cleanliness of your node graph. If you're a reroute person, I am personally not, but I know a lot of people are. And so say if we have a situation like this and I'm running off to a bunch of different nodes, I might say, how do I add a reroute node for all of this stuff? Because I could, right click and, do a reroute, but then that's only for that individual pin. And so, and actually undo does not work on that. So if the UI people are watching on our team, undo does not undo a reroute node, which it should. But anyway, so if you wanted to come here and reroute all this, you control and then click and drag. That's going to give you this reroute node. And if you want to put it back, you just hover it over and it's going to come off. And so that's really, really cool and nifty. Now, what that also allows you to do is, say if I wanted to drag all of these outputs over to this node, normally I would have to come over and do it all one by one. But with this method right here, you just come over, control drag, and then drag it over here. And boom, now my connections are moved. So this is just a really interesting and simple way to kind of clean up your graph. If you want to make sure you do things, you can pull off from this. You can say, hey, I want another noise or whatever, and it's going to spawn that and put it in the most applicable pin for you. You could also do it with, say, something like a blend node, and it's going to put it in the background. You come over here to the foreground, and now we're blending those things together. So it's really quite interesting. And you'll notice that we also have kind of a very fast way that you can spawn nodes. So we don't necessarily have shortcut keys, but if you drag off and say if I want a shape, right, I can search that. And it's not only is it going to find an individual shape for me, it is going to find all of my presets that I may have for a particular shape. And so if I click ring, you'll see here that it has this ring effect, and then this noise is being plugged into the background. So it was kind of multiplying against it. But the idea is for various shapes, you can actually come in here and save different node presets. So if you like a particular noise or something, so say if I really like this noise for some reason, I can come over here, click the plus sign, save it as a preset. Let's say Nick's cool noise or something like that. Right, so Nick's cool noise. And then say if I'm in another project one day and I go, you know what, I really want to use that noise. So I say, Nick's cool noise, enter, boom, there's my noise. And so this is actually saved. And the cool thing is that this right here saves out, into your IlluGen folder. So if you're working on a team, your whole team can start creating node presets for y'all to use across various projects. The next thing I want to show off is how to actually create a subgraph. And then after we get done with the subgraph stuff, we're going to start working on actually creating some cool things inside of IlluGen. But I think it's really important to tell you what your options are for cleaning up the graph and things like that. So what we'll do is this right here is an instance that I thought of that is something very common that I do all the time. So this right here, let's just imagine it's like an impact crater or something for a game. You have a grenade that goes off and you want just a radial explosion of stuff, right? And so this is something that I do all the time, and it's usually the same thing. I have a shape node, a polar scatter, a directional blur, and a UV radial. Those are the 4 nodes that I always use like 99% of the time. And so I was thinking, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should create a subgraph out of this. So if you want to create a subgraph and make it reusable, you come over here, you right click, convert to subgraph. And what we can do is we go ahead and save this as a preset. We will say, ground explosion or something like that. So now if I come over here and do ground explosion, this right here is a subgraph that I can use. Now, if I go over here into this, you can see that we have a background input for this shape because that's what I had. And then we were probably going to need an output for this particular one. And so now this right here is kind of a pass-through node. And then let's say that there's a couple of parameters that I wanted to expose in this. And so maybe I don't want to deal with all this stuff, but I think maybe it's important to, come over here and promote this, which actually I cannot. Maybe I need to do this. Okay, I have to bring it down. Okay, so I'm going to promote, say, directional blur distance. Maybe I want to, promote, my count. I want to promote, maybe my center offset. And then maybe I want to promote something like, my shape type or something like that. So now if I go back to my root and I look here, now I can actually change my directional blur. I can change the number of items that I have in this subgraph, and then I can change this thing. And I do believe that we would have to save this as the same thing, ground explosion, right? And now it's going to save that again. I don't know. My team can let me know if there's actually a way to come here after I've made changes to a direct subgraph, if you can save it. But I think you just have to rename it and override it right this second. But in general, this right here is kind of a way to create subgraphs. And now that's something that you can actually come in and put in any other thing. And of course, you can go in and click in at any time, add new stuff, add new outputs, and so on. So that is subgraphs. So the next piece that I think is very important is understanding data types. So IlluGen works with a lot of different data types. And so this is going to be, say grayscale values. We have things called islands. We have, like I said, grayscale values. We've got UV noise. We have normal maps. We have color ramps. So we have a color output. We have modulation values. And so kind of the idea behind each one of these is, grayscale values are purely black and white. And so you can come in and there's other grayscale things that you can do to it. You can come in and add various utilities and do various things. And so one thing that I'll note is if you spawn a utility, let's say levels, for instance, you'll notice that most utilities have a kind of a white half circle and then a purple top circle. And the reason for that is if you look at this, these these circles here are like gray or white. And then if we go down to a colored option, which is here, you'll see that it's purple. And so what this is telling you is that it actually accepts an input from both color and from grayscale. And so that's pretty important to note. So if there's something where you're like, hey, I want to plug in islands into a levels, it is not going to work because this is orange. It is telling you that you cannot do that. The data that it is working with, it is not yet converted into a form that you could actually plug it into a levels. Now, if I wanted to plug it into a levels, I could do, say, islands to grayscale, and then I could plug this into my levels. And now I can do something with it because now it's the proper data type that I need to continue the graph. And so we have a very strict set of rules for various data types. And we try and make it, very obvious, what it is, where, here it's say UVs. And so basically what we're doing with these islands is we're taking this noise texture, we're saying, give me, the closest amount of pixels that have similar values. And you can see it right here in this graph. And then I say, I want to take those islands and put a separate UV on each one of those individual islands. And then in this case, I want to disperse a star shape on it or something. And so this is very useful for doing, I believe in Substance Designer it's called maybe flood fill or something like that. And so this is very similar to something like that for a workflow. And this is great for, creating rocks or creating repeating patterns or, even bricks and, grids and that kind of stuff. So it's very, very useful for doing that kind of thing. Then of course, like I said, I have my grayscale option here. And then this right here is a UV input. And you'll notice that some different things in the 2D viewport have various preview modes. And so in this case, we can preview the actual texture coordinates. In this case, it's a black and white checkerboard. And then this is kind of a colored checkerboard. And then what it does is inside of IlluGen, you can utilize UV coordinates in a really interesting way. And so not only can you say, bake UVs on a 3D mesh, but you can also come in and take 2D UVs like noise and plug it into something like a texture. Like in this case, we're now distorting this noise. If you see here, any node that has a UV option here kind of has a way to do custom UVs, and we have different things where you can do like aligning various shapes per pixel and things like that. And so if you want to do like say a grass simulation or something like that, you can actually align entire splats of an object from the Fractal node with that. And so then, of course, we have, say, this normal create, and this is creating a normal map, and that should be pretty self-explanatory as to what it is. And then, of course, with colors, if you want to, say, plug in things to a render node, which is up here, you notice that the render node's albedo only accepts color outputs. And so to convert things, you probably want to go over here, create a color ramp. I would use sRGB in this particular instance, and then plug it in. And so that's going to give me the ability to actually plug into something like, say, albedo or emissive or whatever it happens to be for my 3D viewport here. And that's if you're using the renderer node. Or if you want to export to color or something like that, that's going to be pretty cool. And so Nub Bud said, "This is going so fast. Hopefully it's okay. You can always go back and watch this. I'm just trying to give you the quickest crash course into IlluGen possible and cover a lot of information because I don't want this to go on for 2 hours or something like that." So like I said, so there's that. And then the last data type that I can really think of right this second besides geometry is something like a mod cycle. And so if you come over here and let's say that I wanted to expose parameters. So I come over here, select that drop down, expose this to the graph by clicking this, and then I, bring in, say, a cycle. Now this right here is going to rotate and, kind of spam this texture around. And you'll notice just real quick that this is actually like snapping different rotation. That is actually so that it keeps tiling. Now, if I go here and I select no tiling, it's going to allow me to actually rotate this texture just like this and whatnot. And so that is typically probably not what you want. So if you ever find that something is snapping in kind of a weird way, it's because if you have tiling on, it's going to have to do that to make sure that you can actually tile. And so that is pretty interesting. So let's get into kind of a real use case now. And so I've gone ahead and imported a texture here. And so this right here is just a texture that I generated with IlluGen right before this stream. And this is it's a very simple singular image that I exported. It has a red channel, green channel, and an alpha channel. And one of the cool things is if you want to preview that, as alpha, you can come here and select this RGBA button, and it will show you the actual full view of your alpha. And so you can, if you want to preview alpha channels and things like that, IlluGen lets you do that. And alpha channels are no different than any other, red, green, or blue inside of IlluGen. It's all just a grayscale value. So you can make really cool custom alpha channels and do custom alpha packing inside of IlluGen. But I digress. So for instance, the idea that I had is I want to make a custom noise texture with this particular texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my grayscale. I'm going to choose Fractal. And what Fractal does, and actually let me select this and just choose normal color so it doesn't try and show this black as alpha or anything. And so what you can see here is we kind of have this fractal pattern. And the reason why we call it fractal is because we have various fractal octave blending modes that you can have here. And you can see here that you can kind of go through these different ones. And we have also, a number of different, fractal-like patterns that you can choose from these presets that we provide with it. And so also you'll notice that this, it acts similarly to a splatter node as well. And so we're going to splat all these textures here. So if I came here and put in, say, an input pattern, which actually I would have to do a color fractal. Actually, I have two options. So I could come over here and say fractal and do a color fractal. And the reason why is color fractal is a bit more advanced where you have things like, hue variation and things like that. So I can come here, change my hue range, change my saturation. And now I kind of have the all these little smoke puffs spotted around. But if I wanted to operate in grayscale, which I could say bring in, say, just, the red pen, and that's going to splat all these on here like that. or I could do, say, to Grayscale. And so we have a lot of different conversion nodes. And so I probably should have talked about this a little bit earlier, but you can see we have a conversion tab, and you can convert just about anything to just about anything. So that's, color to normal or normal to color, RGB to grayscale. You can convert grayscale to color by using a color ramp. You can split normals, you can split channels, repack things. And so there's a bunch of different utility nodes here that deal with converting various things. And so I think that's very, very useful. But anyway, so maybe just for simplicity here, let me go ahead and just do, say, RGB to grayscale, and I'm going to use this right here as my output. And I'm going to just choose default. And so you'll notice that now we've kind of come here and we've got this interesting splatter. And so this is happening because we have a number of different layers, and then we're saying each of my iterations here. So we have a layer scale per iteration parameter. What it's saying is for each layer that I add, how much smaller is it going to be? And so if I come over here and select this, it's actually going to create like fractals of fractals of fractals of this smaller shape. It's kind of hard to see due to the intensity of it, but that's exactly what it's doing. And so for instance, let's say that I like this, but I want to add in some, random, rotation or some random position. So I can come here, I can say, let's choose the rotation range. We'll kind of add this. We'll do flip randomization so that it randomizes the texture input itself. And then maybe I can come in and do, maybe like a higher intensity range. So I have something like that. And then maybe I want to plug in like a custom UV noise, something like this. But maybe I want to change my scale, to something like that. And now you can see that we have this really interesting custom, billowy noise pattern. And of course, I can go through and change, maybe I want my blending mode to be max, maybe I want to keep it as additive and have these various color differences. I can choose, say billow, and I can just use my arrow keys to kind of come down and cycle through this to kind of see what I like. And maybe I'm like, you know what, I really like the way that max looks. And so then maybe I want to come through and do something like a levels, and then say auto level, and that's going to auto level this thing for me. And so this right here is just an interesting, custom noise pattern that I was able to create, pretty quickly by having an input shape. And then of course, like if you want to, you could come in to say the fractal, and then you can remap the shape itself directly in here without going through a levels node if you don't want to. And you could utilize other input patterns, maybe it's the alpha channel, or, maybe it's just the red channel, or you could do, say, a full color version of this, where we come over and we change, say, the scale, and then we want to reduce like our layer count. And for my scale, maybe I'm going to do something like 500. And then now we kind of have this really interesting blended noise pattern of smoke and stuff like that. And so I think that's pretty cool. And that's a really basic example of something cool. And so let me just read the chat real quick. Yes. And so Love Dinko says, if you see the star icon in the nodes, it will save favorites. And so let's say, for instance, if I have this whole thing and I really, really like, I don't know, position randomization for some reason, if I look at my favorites tab, now I have access to that no matter what node I'm in. So I can always come over here to favorites and change that favorite. You can also randomize stuff too. So say if I wanted to, I don't know, randomize, position randomness, and I wanted to randomize my seed or something like that. If I go to randomize and I click randomize all, now this is going to generate various variations for me as well based on the ranges that I have here. So this is really, really interesting. Abby, you would have to look at the beginning of the stream where I talk about what IlluGen is. But the very simple gist is that this generates assets like you see here. So noise, UV maps, meshes, and so on. And you would use those in something like Niagara or Popcorn Effects or VFX Graph for Unity. You might use it in, Blender or something like that. And so that's kind of the gist of what IlluGen is. And if you keep watching, maybe you'll get some ideas for what it could be used for. Another thing where this is very game oriented, I think, for what this tool actually can do for you, especially inside of a VFX kind of way, is what I have here is I have a looping smoke texture from IlluGen. And you can see that it does not tile very well, unfortunately. And so what we can do is I'm going to come here to my texture size. I'm just going to click 8 times larger to make sure that I sample the full texture resolution that I have here. And then, so that's going to make sure that I get my full texture resolution. You can see that I zoom in really far and it gives me all the details of each individual frame. And what I want to do with this is I want to come in and make sure that each individual frame of this looping simulation tiles so that I could have, say, an animated, tiled noise or something like that. So if I come in, the first thing I need to do is I need to do a sheet decode. And so this is a utility that you can find here in the utils. And so we have two different types of things. We have a sheet decode and we have a sheet encode. And so what they do is, sheet encode basically encodes a sheet from a decode or from, say, any kind of animation that you have. And if I step through, say, like this, it's going to, kind of go through and span frames. And I'm just pressing Z to go through this individually. And so, but if I look at my decode and I press space, you can see that this is actually playing my flipbook. And so this is what this flipbook right here actually looks like. And so, but what I want to do is I want to tile this right here. And so you'll notice that if I come here, this is definitely not a tiling simulation. And one thing I can do is actually say that I want this to loop. And so one of the cool things is too is inside of, say, something like IlluGen, if you have an explosion, you can't really retime your flipbook or anything like that. But here inside of IlluGen, you can retime it. And so let's say if I wanted to come here, select, say, Bezier, I could actually do something like this. And then this is going to remap it to where, say, it goes super fast and then it's slow motion, right? And then I could repack my flipbook to actually behave just like that. So if you want to do any kind of custom retiming, the sheet decode is the node for you whenever it comes to flipbooks. So getting on with the tiling. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say tile. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab that, and I'm going to put that into my sheet decode. And if you look here, you're like, okay, this is not really that pretty. I can see clearly where it's tiling and stuff. And so we have various different tiling modes. And so you can see this right here is like a mirror tiling mode. We have a scale wrap mode where we just kind of rescale it. But what I'm going to use is Voronoi sampling. And I'm going to maybe choose my slicing size to be quite small, maybe change my seed, kind of work on my tiling distance. And I think that that looks pretty good. I think that is a really quite a good blending size. Maybe I'll do like a slicing of 3. And so now I've taken this simulation and I have completely tiled it. And then what that's going to allow me to do, if I reset this and then turn off tiling, okay, why is that not working? Huh. That is very bizarre that it's skipping frames like that. Gil, if you're watching, I think we have a bug. Anyway, this is supposed to pack it properly, but it's skipping a bunch of frames, and I don't know why. So I think that's just a bug. But in general, this is supposed to pack it properly, where you can have a full tiling simulation. And so the idea, and like I said, I do not know why this is buggy. I tried it before the stream and it worked, and it's just, it is not working for me. Let me just test this real quick. Maybe it's the tile node that's broken for some reason. Yeah, I think it's just the tile node that's busted. Maybe did I leave some kind of retiming in? I don't think I did. No. Okay, anyway, I don't know what, oh, hang on, let's see here. 64. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, well, that's working, but it's just not working with tile. Yeah, I don't know. There's some kind of bug here. But we will fix that and we will patch it. But okay, so yeah, so Jill says it is fixed. It will be in the next update. So sorry about that, but the idea here is that you can sheet encode this, and then you will have a perfectly looping tiling noise flipbook that I generated in IlluGen and came into IlluGen. And so Abby, if you're still watching, I believe your name was, you can kind of see kind of what the idea is here of what we want to do with this. So it's kind of a utility tool. It helps you author a bunch of different stuff, and there's just so many different cool things that you can do. So I think the next thing I'd like to do is just kind of show you the basic principles of blending various nodes. And I think I want to kind of try and create a shield effect of some sort. I did not pre-plan this. So I'm just kind of go with the flow, and then you can kind of see my thought process of what I'm going to do. And then hopefully that can translate to you trying to recreate similar things. And so for like a shield effect, what I'm thinking is, over here, I want a gradient that's a bit brighter over here, and then I want most of this right here to kind of fade out. And so I want it to be more of an oriented gradient. If you ever played the game Noita and you grab a wand and it has a shield effect on it, that's what I'm looking for. If you've ever played Noita, great game. I have many hours in it. And so anyway, so I've got this shape. I'm going to turn off tiling, and the shape node alone, or really any of our nodes alone, are extremely powerful. And so there's just so much that you can do with it. And so for instance, we can come in here, we can change, the way that the intensity is remapping. So if you wanted to do, say, something like maybe like an exponential curve or something like that to, match maybe a more realistic, lighting model or something like that, you can come in here and remap this stuff, any way that you want to. And so, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of select this up here, add in another curve to kind of give me a shape like this. And then I'm going to drag this down, and then I'm going to choose Bezier as my interpolation mode for each of these different points. And this is going to give me kind of a smooth gradient. You can choose, say, like this inner filling, and now because I've reversed it, it would normally fill it with, say, white, but because I've reversed the gradient, it's going to kind of allow me to do an effect like this. And so this is, an interesting, example of where, say, maybe a sheet decode would work, just as an example. Or if I come in here and say I animate this with like a cycle or something, you can kind of see that it's going to pack this right here as a flip book for this particular animation, which I think is interesting. And of course, you would need to time this or something properly to work. So if I really wanted to make sure that I time it correctly, I can come here, press Shift to add keys. I'm going to right click this, say frame 64. And then actually it needs to be frame 63 because it starts at 0. And so then what I need to do is say 100, and then here is going to be 0. And now if I pack this like so, you can see that it kind of does this cool little animation. And then if I do a decode on this to preview the animation, maybe something like this, and let's do loop maybe. And so there's my animation that I have saved and converted to a flipbook. And so this right here is just a really interesting way to, kind of preview your flipbooks, make sure that they work, and so on. And so, it's probably unlikely that you're going to save like this particular texture, as a flipbook for a game, because it's a lot of data when you could probably just erode this in a shader. But this is just an example of, the types of things that you can do. So anyway, so let's get back to the gradient. So if I go here and I disconnect this from the timeline, we can see that I've got this cool little gradient. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say copy and paste this. I'm going to plug it into the background. And then I'm going to bring in, say, another gradient. And then this is going to allow me to do this. And so one thing that you'll notice is that instead of me coming in here and saying, blend, pick my foreground and my background, and then come over here to my output and then choose multiply or whatever, I can get the same exact result by just plugging it into the background here. And then if you look at blending, you can say whether or not, you want to multiply or add or, whatever it happens to be with all these different items. And I think for this, I probably want to do something like overlay on each one of these. Because I think it looks pretty cool. Maybe not on that one. Maybe I'll do screen. No, I think multiply is fine for that one. So what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to select my gradient, and I can just rotate this if I want to, or I can come in here and type my particular thing. I'm going to drag this up to kind of give me more of what I'm looking for. And so now we're getting kind of close to the gradient that I wanted, but I think that I do need to change, maybe say my inner filling to give me a much thinner shape here. And so the reason why I've got this one right here is I'm trying to come in and do kind of some extra colors up here. And what I can start doing is maybe add in, say, a color ramp, and then maybe I want kind of a golden, shield or something like that. So I'll kind of just come over here. Come over here, and then let me see if I can fade out on this particular gradient here, maybe a little bit better. And so let me go here, multiply, cross mix, just kind of change this up a little bit, change the intensity a little bit, and just kind of see what we can play with here. And then I'm going to change my color gradient to sRGB. And so this right here is looking pretty cool, but I think that I need to increase the gradient intensity kind of like on this edge maybe. Let's just kind of keep dragging this until it's like where I want it, maybe something like that. And I can drag this down just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I really think I need a blur to kind of blend these shapes together a bit better. And so now this is looking a heck of a lot more like I was anticipating it to. And so this right here is just like, some kind of glow or aura or something like that. For a game, maybe this is, on a sprite, it's around your character or whatever it happens to be. We can come over here, kind of change, the height of this gradient to kind of give me different options. I can come in here and change, say the inner filling of this other gradient. That's going to allow me to kind of come through and kind of piecemeal these different things. And so this right here was just a really, really simple example. One thing I will note is maybe you could come in here and do a transform, and then we can scale this down just a little bit, and you'll notice it's like automatically trying to tile this. And if you don't want that, you come here to texture tiling, say no tiling. I don't want to do that. I only want to scale it individually. And then I'm going to do a glow or something like that. So then we kind of have this glow. Maybe it's not right to put it there, so I'll put that there, and then I will make it glow after the fact. And so we kind of have this cool, ring effect or something like that, and it's really interesting. So that is a very simple example of something like a shield gradient. Kind of took a little bit longer than I anticipated. But this, like I said, this was just off the cuff, and you can kind of come in here and easily, blend things together by using these background pins. And that's one of the key things that I wanted to show off. So I think the next thing, let me just check my time here, 1:13. Okay, so I'm going to try and wrap this up within about 15 minutes, I think. Since this is really just a really core crash course into what this is, and we have so many different nodes. I mean, we have gradients and AO and custom splines, so you can come in here, and click and create various splines and branches and whatever else it happens to be. So there's just so many nodes that you can go in and explore. So I think what we're going to try and do next is I want to try and create a 3D lightning effect, but then pack the mesh in such a way that I could access each individual lightning strike, say inside of my game engine or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Geo, and I'm going to choose, I think a Geo points shape is what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go to my 3D tab. And so you can see here that now I have like this Fibonacci disk of some sort. And you can choose a sphere of points and stuff like that. You can come in and, change their location and do all kinds of cool animation to a bunch of points. You could also come in and, clone meshes to be on each individual point and so on. There's so many things, but this is going to be just a very, very light, a very light crash course into geometry. I am not a geometry professional just yet, since we're still working on a lot of the nodes, but I'm going to show you kind of what I do know. And so I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to do a geo sweep. And so what this is going to allow me to do is, you can see it kind of tries to sweep through this sphere, but what I really want is I want to do a 2D spline. So I'm just going to, double click over here and then just kind of make sure that I'm on this red line. I'm going to click Z, make sure that I'm roughly aligned. We don't have snapping to grid or anything just yet, but I think that this right here is probably pretty good for a lightning bolt. So GeoSweep is going to be my last thing because I want to perform all of my operations between this node and this node, but we're going to stay highlighted on the GeoSweep. And so the next thing I want to do is add in a Geo Combine transform, and you'll notice that it was already here for me because before the stream I was messing with this, and IlluGen will learn your preferences. So if it's like, hey, he's pulling off of a GeoPoint shape, there's a high likelihood that maybe because of in the past they've used, a geocombined transform, that's probably the most likely thing they're going to want to use right now. And so IlluGen will kind of come in and learn some of your presets here versus you having to come down into the menu. And so if you learn these icons, you can kind of utilize that a little bit better. So we're going to go ahead here. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to say that my transform style is global. I'm going to add an operation to these points. I want it to be probably constant because I want it to just be across all points. And I'm going to change my rotation. And we didn't see anything happen there. But if I look here inside of my geometry, and if I click this and click this, and so this right here might be me slightly fumbling just for a second. So normalized this, constant, index, constant. Okay, so there we go. So I needed a constant transform on my points, and now this gives me a thing that's oriented towards my camera. And so that's exactly what I want. Then the next thing that I want to do is I'm like, okay, well, now I want to start adding noise to this. And I can go ahead and preview this. You can see that it is subdivided like crazy. So maybe let's do something like maybe 35. And then for my sweep, maybe we'll do something like maybe a segment count of maybe 20. Now let's do like a segment count of 1 because we really don't need anything more than that. And so now we've got this cool little segment, and I'm actually going to go ahead while I'm here, I'm going to change this size to be more appropriate for something like electricity or a lightning bolt or something. So I'm going to bring in another geo transform. And now what I want to do is I have a number of different options here that I can do. So, and I'll kind of give you an example of the various artistic control that we have to kind of create this this lightning bolt. So let me go ahead and select this. But I want to preview my points here for a second first. And so I'm going to say that my transform style is global. It's not local. I'm going to make sure that we're just adding. I'm not going to subtract anything from this. I want to access the index of each point. And so these are the various indices. You know, this is going from 0 to 34 right this second. And so I want to access each one of these. And then I want to, you know, potentially, so I could add in, say, something like, you know, maybe a noise or something like that. And then, you know, do some kind of transform. And then we can kind of preview how that's going. So I could do, you know, some kind of, you know, a custom source like this to add noise, but I want it to be more controllable by me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a normalized point index. And so now you can see that this geometry is following my line exactly, which is really, really cool. And that's even cooler if we come over here, say, to our curve generator, you right click, you click apply immediately. And now we can do stuff like, you know, change the resolution. We can change the frequency. We can change, you know, the chance that one of these points drops. We can add, you know, custom jitter or whatever it happens to be. You can add, you know, say frequency and so on. So there's all kind of cool stuff you can do there with that. Or we could just come in and maybe we want to, you know, stylize this a little bit. So I'm just double clicking and adding, you know, various points or something like that. And then maybe I want this to kind of like be down here or something like that. And so this right here is kind of a an interesting way to do this. Now, another thing we can do, and I think that this is the way that we're going to go for this type of thing, is we're going to actually do a texture access. And so now we can start controlling these individual points with a texture input. And so I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to grab a noise. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say maybe position on a plane as my coordinate source. And now you can see that if I move this noise, if I can, let me see, position. So if I move this noise, you can actually see that this right here is going to allow me to get various variation in my height here. And so that's going to be really, really interesting for us. And so one thing that I want to do is you'll notice that as I'm moving this, the end of my lightning is kind of moving around. And that's not really something that I want to happen. I want, whenever I bake out this particular animation that I want to send to my game, I want to make sure that I'm keeping these in static. And so the way that I can do that is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do a blend. Unfortunately, we can't do this through the background pin here. And I'm going to grab actually for my background, let me choose a uniform. I'm going to choose 0.5. And so we can see I just have a very flat intensity of 0.5 because our grayscale is normalized 0 to 1. And so I know that 0.5 over here on my remap curve is right there in the center, and that's going to lock these points right here onto this line basically. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to put that into the foreground, and now you can see that we have this, and this is interesting. We need to make sure that this is set as an alpha, and so now there's no value in here that goes below 0.5, but I want to weight it against a gradient. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to select a preset curve here of something like that, and maybe I'll come over here and kind of just drag these edges up. And so this is going to give me a gradient like that. Then the edge is 0.5 exactly. I'm going to plug that into my gradient here. And so now if I come over and I animate this noise, like so, you can see that the endpoints stay where they are supposed to be, except for this one. And so let me look into my Geo transform. I believe I probably need to do something like negative 0.5 to 0.5, potentially. I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm kind of, going, I wonder what's wrong with this. Jill in the chat, do you know what's wrong? what did I do wrong here? This should technically lock that edge down. I can't quite recall what's going on with it. Let's see, texture access, it is a position on a plane. I could try UV coordinate. Let's see, constant, no, position on a plane. So there's that. Repetition. Yeah, I don't necessarily know what's causing that. Maybe my gradient isn't large enough over here. That is possible. Nope, that's not it. Maybe I need to rotate my gradient. So let me just do, say, 90 degrees and see how that operates. No, that is not right either. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this, and I'm going to keep on going. Yep, I changed the blend mode to alpha. I did. And so I'm not sure why that's not locking down that last point. But for the sake of this, we're going to imagine that it does, okay? we're going to imagine that it locks it down just like this one right here. So now that we've got this Geo sweep, I'm going to go here. I'm going to kind of change this range just a little bit. I don't want it to be, so chaotic necessarily. So I think this is pretty good. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomize my seed here. And so this right here is going to give me kind of this random, electric strike type thing, right? And so now what I want to do before I continue is I want to do a scale operation. And so I'm going to come over here and plug this in. And what I want is I want to select my index. I want it to be a normalized point index. And then over here, I just want to kind of scale this like so. And then maybe kind of do something like this, because I want these points over here on the end to pretty much practically be 0, right? And so now you can see that we're scaling this lightning bolt along the various indices, as you can see here, that we are selecting. And so now this right here is scaling this. And this right here is quite interesting. And yeah, I see in the chat that may be a potential bug. I am not sure, because if I inspect the texture, let me go to 2D. Let's see, 2D. Yeah, it is locked down to values of 0.5 over here, so I'm not sure why that wouldn't work. I could try and extend the range a little bit, like this. Maybe that'll lock it down, but I'm doubting it. Yeah, it's still not working. I'm not sure what's happening. Could be a bug. But anyway, so let's just roll with that. And so then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Geo accumulate. And so this right here is where it's going to allow me to start copying various things. And so maybe I want 8 different strikes. I want to encode my frame ID inside of the alpha. And then if I come here and I select my alpha channel, you can see that as I go through this, now let me turn off my grid, turn off my stuff here. We're actually encoding these various strikes through the vertex colors alpha channel. And so in your shader in your game, what you can do is you can say, hey, I only want to show the vertices of this singular mesh that match X value. So let's say 0.5. And so then it will only show you the value that's actually 0.5. And so it'll only do that particular lightning strike. And so what that'll do is that'll give you an animation that looks something like this, right? And so that right there is about 8, right? And so it's going to look like that. And so that's going to give you that randomization. And so you could come in, you could choose, maybe different noises. We can change, say the scale of the noise if we wanted it to be maybe more stylized or, whatever it happens to be. Yeah, it looks like maybe there's a bug there. I wonder if that's the part that's staying by. Maybe did I make my my point shape too long? That could be it. Yeah, I think it's just the point shape was too long for some reason. I haven't ever encountered that bug. I figured it would go through all indices. So okay, there we go. We kind of solved it. So this right here is kind of that, and then we can go ahead and accumulate that geometry, and then there's our accumulated lightning strike. So like I said, and Danger in the chat says this has potential. It does have potential. Like it's kind of buggy from time to time. And it does take kind of learning what each of these things do, but it is really, really quite cool to just be able to come in and generate something that's going to, offset your vertex color automatically and then pack this in a way that you could read this in your game engine. And of course, maybe you want to, apply something where, your normals or something like that, like you can preview the normals where maybe the normals are always facing the camera or some kind of thing like that. So that would be interesting. LCR BrickTech says, who here uses a Mac? A lot of people on our team use a Mac. I don't, but some people on our team do. So IlluGen does work on Mac, and that is definitely cool. And yeah, Jill, you might be right. Maybe my my UVs were tiling for some reason. I'm not sure. We'll have to look at that. I'll send you the preset after the call or after this training stream. So while I'm here, that's pretty much the gist of what I wanted to show. I kind of went through, I showcased, general, 2D workflows. I showcased how to pack flipbooks. I can also show you how to actually export real quick. So let's see, export, model, and then you would click export. And in this case, because you're waiting on an accumulation at frame 8, you would want to say export frame 9, and then that right there would actually go through. We've accumulated, export complete, and now that FBX is on my machine. So that's one way to do it. Another way is, say I could come here, export, you could do an export grayscale. You could do an export, say color. In this case, we would need to actually do a color ramp to color this properly. Maybe you could do RGB or sRGB. It's up to you of how you want to pack that. But you can come here, export the color, and do that. If you wanted to export, say maybe a custom RGBA, there's 2 ways that you can do that. So let's say if I wanted to use this as an alpha, so I could type, say, alpha merge. I want this to be my color, so my RGB. This is my RGBA. And so if I go to 2D and preview this, you can see that this right here is what the texture looks like. So I'm previewing that quite nicely. So that's interesting. And then if I wanted to export the color, of course, then this would finally export alpha as well. If I click this, export alpha. But if I wanted to do custom packing, I could say export multi. Actually, let me say, I would need to do it on a grayscale. So multi material. Okay, that's the wrong thing again. Multi-material. And so then if you wanted to do custom packing, this is how you could do that. And so for instance, if you wanted to see what maybe a custom pack looks like, let me just choose like some random noises. So let me do, say, like a noise. I'll do a shape, and then I'll do, I don't know, maybe like a spline or something like that. So we'll do a spline real quick. And let's go ahead and select this output. Okay, it will not let me create points for some reason. There we go. There's my spline. And I do dislike that it tries to save your alpha selection like this. I only want to preview it like that. Okay, so I've got these three different things. And then if I do say RGB, you can do an RGBA merge if you want to preview this in your graph. So we could do something like that. And then maybe we want to do, I don't know, like a square or something like that as our alpha channel. And so then if we select this, now we can see our custom packed coordinates. There it is with alpha. If you wanted to see that, then you've got your R, your G, your B, and your A. And then if you wanted to split to reuse this in the graph, maybe you wanted to prototype some shaders or something like that, you can come here and preview each individual channel, which is really, really dope. So that's kind of the gist of how you export. If we look at, say, some presets, here are some kind of more complex things that you can do inside of IlluGen. So if you want to get really good at the geometry aspect, you can do things like growing flowers and so on. And so that's really quite interesting. And so the idea here would be that in the future, hopefully the near future, you'll be able to export this, as a vertex animated texture, which would be really quite cool. And then we also have things like this electric arc. So there is kind of a electric arc like thing that we have here. You can see the Geo sweep kind of doing its thing. You could export this as is, or you could export the noise here and then do this animation in your game engine. That's kind of really the idea that we would be going for. And then you would probably do some of this shader work right here inside of your game engine too, or you could export it as a flipbook. It kind of depends on what your goals are. Like you could bake this right here out as a flipbook in itself if you really wanted that. And so that's pretty cool. So from there, I think that's pretty much it. I don't have a whole lot else to show. We have a lot of different presets that you can kind of go through and look at. Of course, I did mention on my stream yesterday about this particular furry ball, and you can actually export this by doing baking the individual pivot points for each of these strands. And so that's a really, really cool thing that you can do. So you can export the individual pivots and then kind of change, and offset the pivots in your game engine to get the same exact animation by running noise over it. So that's quite interesting. I do not think we support SDF by default just yet, at least not in a 3D manner. We don't. Not yet, I don't believe. So yeah, there's just tons of stuff that you can do with this. I mean, the possibilities are endless, I do believe. And there's just so many different things that you can come in and do. Whether it's things like sword swipes, like we have here. And this right here is a really good example of how you pack things for a game engine. So you can see here we generated our core, noise textures like we have here. And then we went ahead and packed those. And now this right here is something that you can pack and use inside of your shader. Then we came up here and we said, okay, these right here are my other various masks and stuff. I'm going to pack those into this texture. And then we're using that same output that would have been packed into the rest of this, which I would consider this to be like the shader prototyping phase, right? So, we're doing like a panner, we're blending. So basically say multiplying nodes, we're, adding a gradient or something like that. We're doing some more blending and just so on and so forth until we get down the line. And then you would want to kind of replicate something like this shader in your game engine. Now, our idea for the future is that we want to be able to take this and we say, okay, this right here is the texture generation section, and there's that. And then we have this. This is the shader generation section of your stuff. And then the idea would hopefully be, don't quote us on this, but I hope that we can do this, is we would say, okay, export this to Unity VFX Graph or export this to the Unreal Material Editor. And then it would try its best to make this shader code for you so that by the time you hook up your various textures here inside of Unreal, this is the exact result that you get. And so that's kind of the idea of what we're looking for and what we'd like to do. So that's kind of the path that we're headed, I think that IlluGen is really powerful, and there's just so many cool things you can do. Whether it's 3D waterfalls, and we actually make the textures for all that, and we make the mesh, and then you export the mesh to your game. You can do some cool like tornado effects here. You can do really cool whirlpool portal things if that's something that you want. Export this as a flipbook or export it as individual elements if you wanted to kind of rebuild the effect as multiple particles. So there's a bunch of cool stuff that you can do. Do you plan to add support for linking IlluGen with other tools like Blender, Krita, etc.? Probably, I would say probably not on Stable Diffusion. We're anti-AI, so I would say definitely no on that. But we do eventually want to have an API, and so if you want to build, some kind of link to something like that, or if the community wants to build links, they can do that kind of thing when we have our API out. So I would say that probably. I think that our bigger goal for this kind of thing, and like I wouldn't say we would do this to Krita, because IlluGen is going to have a full painting workflow where you can create your brushes in the graph. You can, you'll have a full, brush editor and everything, and you'll be able to just do painting with your tablet and stuff like that. So, because we want to, extend this to all visual effects professions inside of games, where it's like, hey, I am a 2D, oriented stylized artist, and I hand paint most of my textures. Great. Utilize IlluGen to generate your brushes or load brushes, and then run procedural algorithms on those brush strokes and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that we'll be able to do. And I think that our first step is going to be exporting to Engine for sure. Yeah, maybe having custom HLSL code to pop into a node. Yes, that would be interesting too. The problem is that we use our own shading language. We use our own graphics, interface, because we're kind of stepping away from OpenGL a little bit, as far as I understand. And there's a lot of complicated things we do, and so we would just have to figure out a way to translate it back to HLSL. But we also want to make sure that we don't crash the graphics card, because that's really easy to do. Unlike a lot of other tools that do similar things, we do not do this stuff on the CPU for the majority of it. All of this right here is calculated on the graphics card, and so we can actually come in and handle some fairly good sized textures and stuff, because we want this to be really performant. And if we're interacting with geo and textures and stuff, if we keep it all on the GPU, that keeps it really fast. So it's kind of the idea. But yeah. So that's pretty much it. Any final questions? I will show my camera again. Let's see. Here we go. Show my camera. Hopefully the audio is synced. I don't know if it is or not. I think y'all said earlier that it was, but that's pretty much it. Hopefully this was a really good crash course into it. Let me know if I did a good job. Let me know if I did a bad job. I think I covered the vast majority of the key things that you need to know, from data types to adding reroute nodes, adding new nodes, grouping things, exporting stuff, importing stuff, and then just kind of doing a couple of little examples of the utility of what IlluGen can do for you. I think this was a pretty good crash course, and I hope to record some more tutorials this week, hopefully, if I have the time, and we'll put it out there. Is there a way to work closely with support team to make it bug free? Yes. In our Discord, it says IG feedback and bugs. It's a little form. Go on there, post your bugs, and we will make a GitHub issue for it internally, and we will fix it. So yes, please work with us. I mean, I beg you to work with us closely, to tell us what you want. Tell us the features that you want. Eventually IlluGen is going to do things like destruction. It's going to be able to slice up a mesh. You create the materials for the inside and then export that as, a pivot baked item, or you simulate the destruction on a small scale. We're not talking about, destroying a whole freaking skyscraper or something here, but you can do very simple destruction and stuff in the future is kind of our goal. Or, we want to do simple 2D simulations. So we want to have a 2D version of EmberGen inside of IlluGen and things like that, where you can kind of do cool things. We want to have things similar to substances like pixel processor. So if you are of the more technical oriented, I want to control every single pixel, then you'll be able to do that kind of thing. So there's a lot of ideas that we have, many things that are coming to this. And the idea that we have is that we want this to be like the pinnacle tool for visual effects and tech art in games, and even like some CGI stuff, I'm sure. But the primary goal is in games, in-game engines. Because right now, as a visual effects artist, before this tool, I would have to use Photoshop and Substance and After Effects and Houdini and Blender and Maya and 3ds Max and this and this and this to do various little things that I wanted to do because I only know the workflow in this other tool, or it has some special plugin that only works with this tool or whatever it happens to be. And we're kind of taking all those little things that have happened, throughout the industry over the past 20 years, all the little tools, that visual effects artists and games use. And we're like, okay, how can we condense that into one singular platform and make generating, say, erosion textures easy, or making flow maps easy, or making, FX meshes like this, like lightning, where we pack, the vertex colors individually or whatever, right? Like there's so much stuff. And yes, DPI Studios, there is a flow map visualizer that we built for this. And in the future, I would hope that once we have the painting workflow, you will be able to just paint and liquefy a texture coordinate to make a custom flow map. But you can already make flow maps right now with our UV nodes. We have extensive amounts of UV nodes, whether it's noise or directional, stuff. You can do radial things. You can do, all kinds of different all the kind of different stuff. You can even like take a texture that you have and then make a UV flow map out of that. I can actually show that on my screen real quick, just in case you want to see. So kind of the way that you would do that is, let's say that I wanted to make this right here a UV map. I can just do gradient, or let's see, UV from derivative. And then there you go. There's my flow map for this, right? And so that is really, really cool. That's it. That's the flow map, and this would probably create some kind of swirl. One thing I can do is, let me see, can I choose flow map? Let's see, flow map. I thought we had a subgraph that had that in it. So let's see, select all, upstream, copy. Let me go to my flow map previewer. This is a really janky way to do it, but I'm going to see if it'll work. It may not. Okay, let's see. UV input. Voila. There you go. So yeah, you'd probably want to like just do this inside of the flow map player node or project in general. But that's really cool, right? That you can just kind of see how this works. Now we can come in and we can tweak this, and we can go, oh, maybe I want to like lower the intensity a little bit. Maybe I want to, change, the rotation of this derivative or something, or whatever it is you want to do, right? So like that's really, really cool to just come in, quickly make this, and then if you want to export this, you just say export, type, and like that's the really cool thing about IlluGen. Like, look at that. Like I don't even say, if I don't even know what something's called, I just go, maybe I want to, export this. What are my options? Okay, cool, right? How awesome. So really, really interesting stuff that you can do in IlluGen. I mean, we've only just barely scratched the surface of what this tool can do and what it's going to be able to do. So I'm really excited. I hope that this helped. I am 15 minutes over time, so I'm going to call it. But if you have any questions, please join our Discord. It's JangaFX.com/Discord, and we have a whole IlluGen community there that's already working on making really cool stuff, even doing stuff like, bricks and wood textures and grass and just all kind of stuff that is a bit outside of the scope of what we were originally planning for. But there's many other use cases for IlluGen, as you'll see. So yeah, join our Discord, and we will talk to y'all later. Tomorrow is the LiquiGen live training. So if you want to learn how to do viscosity, surface tension, and a number of other cool liquid-like things. If you want a crash course in that, we're going to be doing our LiquiGen live training for LiquiGen 1.0 tomorrow. That's it. I'll see y'all later.